Yesterday, Marvel Snap announced the compensation package that we have been waiting on the entire time the game has been out. An incredibly generous piece of compensation going to the United States players that were affected by the outage of Marvel Snap due to the TikTok ban, and also across the globe, every player of Marvel Snap will be getting a care package as well, that in my estimation is also extremely generous. Let's dive into what everyone is going to be getting and how it maths out. The compensation package is split into 4 groups. There are those who are affected by the bug on the US server, which they are defining as everyone who made an account before January 20th on the US server or has logged in from a US IP in the 30 days prior to the ban. And in addition, there are those who are under CL 500 who fit in that same category. The reason they split CL 500 and the other players is because you can't really compensate players who are below collection level 500 with tokens and spotlight keys because they simply will not have access to the shop in order to use them. The shop, of course, unlocks at CL 500, so there is going to be a greater focus on those who are above CL 500, but I do think it's worth pointing out why they had to split compensation like this. When it comes to what we're actually getting, we being those of us in North America who were affected by the outage, i.e. have logged in from a US IP and or made their account in the United States, which I think is a very good way of targeting this, they will be getting the following: 2 spotlight keys, 5,000 season pass XP, 4,150 credits, 6,200 collector's tokens, 1,000 gold, 5 gold conquest tickets, 3 infinite conquest tickets, 1 mystery variant, 6 premium mystery variants, 4,000 conquest medals, 1 cosmic red border, 3 cosmic gold borders, and a bunch of boosters. So how generous is this exactly? I did a little bit of math because I saw this post flying around and I thought it seemed a little bit too good to be true. Specifically, where I took issue with this is in the valuation of spotlight keys and collector's tokens. I think they were a little bit generous in terms of those valuations. That spotlight key is just in terms of the amount of credits it takes to unlock a spotlight key and then convert it into gold, which I think is far too generous. So I went and looked at what the amount of credits I get from a typical 120 journey on the collection track from a spotlight key to a spotlight key is. And I typically get about 2,000 credits worth of credits themselves in terms of stuff I get out of various caches, and of course the 50 credits you pick up along the way. And I get about 3 premium or normal mystery variants, I should say, which is valued at about 2,100 gold. So once you adjust for that, you end up with math that looks a lot more like this. The big ticket items remain mostly the same, but we're being a little less generous in terms of what the valuation on them is. However, it is still a remarkably generous valuation, even when you're a little bit harsher on them than the original person who posted this was. The math I did ended up saying that we get about 30,000 gold worth of compensation for anyone over CL 500 in North America. That is by far the most generous compensation they have ever done. That is split in such a way that about 18,000 of that gold goes to progression, and about 11,000 of that gold goes to cosmetics. That is an interesting thing to keep in mind as well, because 18,000 gold going to progression and 11,000 gold going to cosmetics, different people are going to value that differently. I've seen a lot of complaining from people in Europe who were saying that they were mad that NA is getting so much compensation in terms of the cosmetics they were getting. But from looking at it here, I think that calling this a 30,000 gold compensation, while technically true based on the math that I have done, would be a little bit misleading about how it's being compensated because of the way in which different people value different things. I, for example, probably don't care about any of the cosmetics. They don't matter to me at all. So I'm getting about 18,000 gold worth of progress out of this. That's what I actually get out of this compensation. People who are full up on variants, I know there are people who are variant complete or rare variant complete, they might feel a certain way as well. I think there are definitely going to be people who care more about the variants than they do about the progression or things of that nature. Either way, what is happening is the single biggest, I don't want to call it a wealth transfer, but this is the single biggest boom in terms of the player population's ability to purchase cards that has ever happened. 6,200 collector's tokens is more than one Series 1 card. For the record, the 200 comes from the inability to do weekend missions. That's why it's 6,200 instead of 6,000. And 2 Spotlight keys is obviously extremely helpful as well. Those are, as I said, the big ticket items. Those are going to be the things that everyone really, really cares about. There's some credits in there too. There's some gold in there too. But really what people are going to be here for is, oh my God, they gave us some cards. I can't wait to see what this ends up doing to the economy of North America. I know they must have concerns. The non-US gratitude package is an interesting thing to me that it exists in the first place. Global players were barely impacted by this change. I think the best arguments you could make for global player impact is that they had to listen to all the US players complain all the time about what was going on, and also that maybe it disrupted their alliance missions, maybe it disrupted their ability to play fast games in Conquest, things like that. These are fairly minor, and this as a reward is major. To be clear, what people who did not get impacted by are getting is more than half of the progression value of what people who actually did get impacted are getting. This is extremely generous on the part of Second Dinner, and I can only interpret it as an attempt to use this as a springboard to win back lapsed players. Because everyone who had an account before January 20th will receive, at minimum, the global rewards here. Meaning, even if you weren't in the US, this is a great time for you to come back to Marvel Snap. And if you were in the US, it's obviously an even better time to do that. They also mentioned that VPNs shouldn't affect anything either way. If you VPN'd while being in the US to try to play the game, you're still going to get the US compensation. By the same token, if you VPN'd to the US to try to farm compensation, that will not work, I believe. So, what actually is the globe getting? 2 Spotlight keys, 3,000 collector's tokens, 1,500 credits, 1 premium mystery variant, 1 normal mystery variant, 1 gold border, 1 red border, and of course, a bunch of boosters. Using the same ratios I found earlier, which even if they're not exactly correct, it is still a good comparative metric because we're applying the same multipliers to each of them. We have 2 Spotlight keys at 5,900. Those are, of course, still the big ticket item. 3,000 collector's tokens at 3,800. Of course, those are as well the big ticket item. And our 1,500 credits comes in at 1,200 gold. Not nearly as big ticket, but there is still a lot going on here. This gives us a total of more than 10,000 gold of progression value in this game for nothing. They get this for free. This is all going to people, again, who explicitly were not impacted by this. I can't think of an argument that would justify this level of compensation if I was looking at what actually happened. Okay, your queues might have been longer. Okay, maybe we're missing out on some global rewards. Okay, maybe you missed out on some alliance rewards. That in no way comes anywhere near 10,000 gold in progression. Not even close. And that is a really remarkable thing because it means that they've been far more generous than they have any actual need to be. They could have nickel and dimed this and looked at what was actually missed out and probably come up with a number that is closer to 1,500, maybe 2,000 gold at maximum. Instead, they're getting 5 times that. And the reason I think this is a good thing is because the NA compensation is so insanely generous that this almost manages to feel like just something that is fine. I have seen people who are not in North America complaining about how much more North America got. And I think that's really interesting because when you look at how these compensations are split up, the relative amount of stuff that EU and the rest of the world, I should say, got compared to the US, a lot of progression is covered and very little cosmetics are. And I think that's kind of fascinating. They focused on giving people progression value instead of cosmetic value for the global bundle, where NA sort of rakes it in, getting a million premium mystery variants while EU gets one. And I think that's really interesting. Also, you're going to have to forgive me for the NA EU stuff here. I'm using it as shorthand for US and rest of world, but I'm actually so brain poisoned by League of Legends that I just constantly think in terms of NA and EU, even though I absolutely should not do that. That's the honest answer as to, like, if anyone's writing an angry comment, just link them this part in the video. Anyway, what I should say here is that it seems like global players are getting a great deal, honestly. They're not even remotely impacted to the level that they're being compensated, and they are benefiting, in my opinion, from Second Dinner's desire to try to use this as an attempt to win back players. If it's going to be a win-back attempt, if you're going to be able to have people writing articles that are like, this is the best time to pick up and play Marvel Snap since it came out, you're going to need to actually justify that, and this compensation, even though the EU people, the global people weren't affected, is going to be enough to justify that. Marvel Snap comes back with the best compensation, full stop, end of story, is a really good story to have written about you. And I appreciate their desire to take control of this narrative, because it's so rare for me to see a decision Second Dinner made get this level of acclamation and praise. And frankly, I am very happy for them and for me that they've been able to do this, because the happier people are with Marvel Snap, the more they might watch me play it. For those of you who are global players who are wondering why NA or America got so much more generous in terms of what they got in total, I think the answer should be clear, but I'm going to run through it just in case. America was actually impacted by this. Something actually happened to them that caused them to lose access to the game. It is continuing even right now. If you are on the Google Play Store at the time of recording, you cannot download Marvel Snap. If you are on the App Store, and I don't think this one's going to run into at the time of the recording because the Google Play Store is being worked on, the App Store seems like it might take a little bit longer, you still cannot download Marvel Snap. If you are using either of those platforms, you are unable to make purchases in the app. You literally cannot buy stuff unless you use the web shop. That's crazy. That's happening right now. In addition to that, this is a situation where the company was blindsided with a loss of service that they had no idea was actually going to happen. Whether or not we want to blame them for that, maybe they should have had an idea. The fact is that it is sort of a non-negotiable problem. Like, you can't have that happen without trying to make it better. And I think that the fact that NA is getting so much more is good because they were the people who were impacted. But I also think that if you are someone who is in the global community, you should look at this and say, they structured this in such a way that it was very beneficial for me. Because they could have given you, I don't know, 5,000 gold worth of progression and 7,000 gold worth of cosmetics. They could have done that, but they didn't. They structured it in such a way where you got the most actual money in this situation. If you want cosmetics, you can just go take the money you were going to spend on progression and go spend it on cosmetics. You can do that. Progression is the only non-negotiable area of Marvel Snap. Cosmetics are all optional. Progression isn't. You need cards to play the game. And the way they set up the global reward system is genuinely very generous in that context, if you ask me. So, when is this actually going to happen? As far as I know, the compensation is planned to come out in the next week. That means the week after this, not a week from today. It is unclear on a specific date, but they were clear that they do plan on making it happen next week. Now, that timeline is very interesting. They're currently in the process of getting the game back up on the Google Play Store. We have not had any news about the App Store, which matches with my understanding of Apple being a little more finicky about stuff like this than Google is. However, by the time the next patch comes around, which is the 4th of February, I would expect to have the game up, and I'll tell you why. Because I think they would have told us if they were going to miss a patch because of this. Right now, they need to get the game back on the Play Store, then back on the App Store, and then make sure their patch is able to function. But luckily, the patch is not scheduled to happen, I believe, until the 4th, so that is their deadline as far as I'm concerned. This is an awkward time to have the game be unpatchable. There is actually a bug running around. It isn't like the most impactful thing of all time, but there is a bug wherein if you use Symbiote Spider-Man on a naked Absorbing Man, it can copy that card that the Absorbing Man tries to copy 31 times. There is a bug in the game right now. That's a real thing, and the game can't be patched. So I'm really hoping that they're able to actually get that going and make this actually make sense. For my ultimate take on compensation, I think this is basically the good timeline. We live in the blessed timeline. We are getting so much stuff. It will be the best time to ever play this game that has ever existed since it came out. Whether you're in America and were affected by it or in part of the global community, there will be a massive bonus for you. More than 5 figures of gold worth of progression for everyone is a crazy, crazy amount of compensation. Now, overall, my take, I probably would have given the rest of the world a little bit less. I understand that they're doing it as a forward-thinking look at let's go out of our way to also use this as an opportunity to win back players, and I respect that, and I think it's a good idea. But it does sort of bug me that like the amount of people I've seen complaining from the rest of the world has sort of poisoned me on the idea, because I look at the rest of the world stuff and I'm like, okay, literally nothing happened to you and you're getting a ton of stuff. You're getting $100+ worth of free stuff for something that didn't affect you. And they're still complaining. And it is starting to bother me. Where it's like, a lot of the feedback is good on this, but it's like, I don't understand, frankly, where you get off if you're complaining about this from a rest of the world perspective. They could have been so much worse about this and it still would have been good. They went above and beyond by like a factor of 2, frankly, for both the US and the rest of the world. Maybe more than that for the rest of the world, because again, weren't impacted. And so when I look at this, I am blown away. Like, I have long been someone who did not buy into the idea that there was an issue with the publisher causing Snap to be the way that it was. I just didn't buy it. I was like, as far as we know, everything is in-house at Second Dinner. I don't know why I'd blame the publisher for any of this stuff. There's no reason to. But seeing this happen, the second they look at moving on from this publisher, it does give me pause. I'm not going to lie to you. All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed that rundown of our compensation. It is totally, totally insane. Thank you so much for watching. I have been KM Best. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.